What's going on, guys? Welcome to Half Court Heaves. I don't know if I'm going to do that every time, but I definitely did it this time. I am your host, Tony Schwartz NBA.
And I'm your other host, Gifted Hoops. We like basketball, so we're here. Tony, tell the people exactly what we'll be getting into.
Well, first of all, we are two men in very expensive sweaters. I think we have to earmark that first. Okay.
Same color, by the way, which we did not talk about at
No.
all. It just happened to be the same color.
Yeah, we've officially cornered the fantasy basketball expensive sweater market. No one's topping this.
None.
So
None.
what we're going to do with Five Reasons Sports for the entirety of the season on a weekly basis, we will have a day prepared that we release these episodes, and you guys will be able to follow this throughout the season and see what's going on and what's happening. But the idea here is we want to give you some fantasy basketball analysis in a cooler vehicle than it typically comes in. So, Gift, to go ahead and break down what that's going to be, how we're going to approach this.
Yeah, so we are two very detail-oriented people, as you can tell from, again, our expensive sweaters. Specifically, we come from a past of being gambling degenerates. And
Yes.
to be fair, we watch a lot of basketball as well. So with that being said, on a week-to-week basis, we are going to be breaking down the ins and outs of how to play fantasy basketball, the good, all the bad stuff on the people to draft, to not draft, and more importantly, like general gems and upkeep as you progress through the fantasy NBA season. I have done a league for about 3 years now. Tony is actually in my league for this season, so we'll be able to co-document our journey through the league this year too.
Yeah, and I've been playing fantasy basketball for probably 10 years. I've played it, every year. I've been a fan because I was already doing fantasy football. So when I switched over to basketball, that was there, nine cat, the other things. But this is a points league, right? If this is a 10-team points league, it's as vanilla as it gets. We should be helping the most people we possibly can this year.
Absolutely. This is a points league. So for those of you who don't really know how to play fantasy basketball, basically you draft these players to get all the points you can. You get points from rebounds, assists, steals, blocks. Basically, all the stat sheet stuffers that people might call trash in real life are super valuable in fantasy basketball. And it's your job to find these players and execute them. And we're going to help you out with that.
Yep. It's not about popularity. It's not an all-star game. It is just about getting points. So this league that we're going to be in will be the backdrop for, I don't know, about 50% of the episodes, 25% maybe. And it's going to give us catalysts and talking points every week for different things that occur and how we process them and take you through what a season of fantasy basketball looks like from our two eyes and the decisions that we make along the way, which is really fun because now you have to be held accountable when you pick up Kualabe and he goes 0 for 5 and you dropped a point guard that got 10 assists that night.
That is exactly what will be happening on a given week-to-week basis. And the coolest part about our first episode here is we're doing this right before the draft.
Yes.
That's right. This is right before the draft, before me and Tony have officially drafted our team. So we are going to be giving you our early insights and analysis on what's going to pop, what might not pop. And then in our next episode, we'll have the full draft day recap, which should be hilarious.
Yeah, and I do want to say from this first episode specifically, it's going to be shorter. It's going to be more focused on just broad generalizations. As we develop this show through the years, we're going to really get in depth about our draft process and who we target. We're going to really get in depth about what kind of things we're thinking about when talking about trades and waiver wire acquisitions post draft, because I feel like that's a thing it doesn't get talked about a lot, especially in fantasy content. What kind of moves you make directly after the draft? You have your buy, your hold, and your sell players and your waiver wire acquisitions. And then guys that you're stashing for what reasons. And usually if you're stashing a guy, a lot of people think about stashing that guy. So can you sell that guy, even if he's injured? A lot of the times the
These
answer
are
is
things
yes.
that matter.
Yeah.
Yes. These are things that make or break your entire season. So you definitely want to make sure you're tapped in.
All right, so we're gonna just go ahead and touch on again some general draft concepts. My big question that I have for Gifted: when round one is over, All right. When you're done, you pick your guy, right? Your first, your seventh, your 10th. After you get your dude that you've targeted, you go into that second round. What are you looking for immediately? What are some of the key things that you want to see happen in that first round that tell you where I'm going in my second round? Do you have some kind of broad strategy or are you adaptable? What's going on?
So I think the most important thing in fantasy is to always be aware of who is available and who's not. And after your first pick, your mind should then go to, okay, who's the next best player available for what my goal is? A lot of different GMs have different ways to go about it. For me, we're playing in a points league. So to me, I'm on usage. How good are you? How easily do you impact every stat you can get in the game? I'm a huge stocks guy because those are big variance points that can swing games and really entire weeks. But also, how available are you to accumulate these stats? There's also some guys where, hey, you might not be a long-term player for me, but I'll take you super high just to make sure I can have the trade value I'm going to get from you early on. That's happened a lot in our league. So those are the two things that I really hone in on. Because again, that second pick really sets the bedrock for your team, depending on who you're choosing to build around with your number one pick. So that matters tremendously.
Yeah, and I'm in that same boat. I'm really thinking about trades with that second pick, not because I want to trade that player. It just depends on what kind of name recognition is there. And if we're in a snake, which I don't know, are we in a snake? This is a
Yeah.
good
Yes.
question. So if we're in a snake, I need to know, okay, who am I going to miss out on by the time this comes back to me, right? So if I'm early in the snake, which I was late in the first round, I'm taking impact that first way through. And then immediately I'm going wing or center on the way back. So typically that can be adaptable depending on who's on the board. But typically you have great guards available in the second round. And I will bend and let some of them roll to get a great wing or a great center. It's going to help me fill stats. And you got names, dude. If you start looking at like that second tier of guys, those round two players, you're looking at Senguns and Kevin Durant's and Maxi's and James Harden's, Sabonis's. Like those are pretty high dollar names in a lot of leagues. But you got to ask yourself, well, where will you take Amen Thompson? You know,
Right.
with the stocks, you know, where are you going to take a Jalen Williams who kind of gives you a little bit of everything on the floor? Are you going to miss out on a player that can really help you stuff all the stat sheets? You know, if Carl Anthony Towns is there, great. But what are you going to do if you're picking between Kevin Durant and Jalen Williams? Well, what happens there when you have a great guard or a great aging player versus somebody younger that you feel like you might get more individual stats from in different categories?
Yeah, and it can be extremely difficult because you might be higher on a player like I would say Durant, but then you have to say, okay, well, his role is going to be extremely high, which is very good early on, but how does he hold up for the entire year?
Yeah.
How does his roster dynamics impact how he produces, right? Jada might not output a more nightly basis in points, but he's more versatile. He can play three positions, which is tremendous. Getting players that can play many different spots matters because then you don't have to pin yourself down to really one player. You have a guy who can fill in multiple roles. So choosing what you do in between those can make or break your entire draft, honestly.
And I think like the topic going into uh, pretty much everybody's draft board is how high are you going to take Zion Williamson? Like
Oh,
where are you if you had Zion at what number are you the happiest?
yes, I got to say this, man. I have been a member of Zion FC for a very long time, and there's a lot of good, positive PR for him to have a good, strong breakout season. But at the same time, the dude misses a lot of games. And do you want to be on the end of that? Maybe you do because this might be the year it changes. I think for Zion, what matters the most is are your picks before Zion reliable? Do you feel like, okay, these guys I know for a fact I can trust if Zion isn't playing games? Also, something I always do, if I ever draft a player that I feel like is going to get hurt, I look to see who's the next best option on his team that will have an increased role if he goes down. I want to get that guy.
Yeah.
Um, I do want to ask you though, what for you specifically are you staring at in terms of the most important stat you want to go for when drafting your players?
Rebounds and steals. Rebounds
Okay.
and steals tend to be the two things that I look at. If you can impact that stat while also having, some kind of variance inside of points and assists, I'm generally pretty high on that player. Like, I will probably be higher than Alfred Sengun than a lot of people in our league will be. Um, and I shouldn't talk about strategy too much with you. But
Now,
but
I
just
think
as
that's
an
valid.
example, a guy like Alfred Sengun, a guy like Sabonis, who we both have like, we take Sabonis in everything always. Um, and this is going to be a year with Zach LaVine where you really have to challenge yourself and ask, like, what does that mean for him? And then actually, this is a great topic too. Players like Zach LaVine, Trey Young, these guys who you traditionally would take pretty high, but have no idea what their circumstances are going to be, not just with health, but team location,
Right.
role. Where are they going to be by the end of the season versus where they are now? Do you give that a lot of consideration in the draft? Are you thinking about that at all during your process? Or is it like, I'm just taking best available and rolling with it?
Great question. I think you absolutely had to factor it in. For me, I'm very much a long-term guy on my first earlier picks. After that, I'll choose guys that can basically be stopgaps. But those things matter, dude, because if Zach LaVine gets traded to a different team that's actually trying to win at a higher level, that's going to impact what his stats are, right? I also think that playing next to other guys who get stats impacts how well that player can also get stats. So these are things that matter tremendously. Like, how realistic is it that they're going to not only produce, but be in a favorable spot to produce for a long time? That stuff
Yeah.
definitely matters.
Yeah. And it's not to shy off of Zion, because that's really what this conversation was about. I don't think Zion's getting traded, but it just was something that I was thinking about during that conversation. When I think about, to flip the question on myself, where I could get Zion and be extremely happy is anything, anything close to 25 to 30. If
Mm.
I'm picking him somewhere in between 25 to 30, I'm really stoked. But the conversation is dark horse, is sleeper, is league winner. It's you have to make a decision on, are you the type of guy that's going to really early go boomer bust on a player when there are opportunities on the board for other guys that can be more consistent? But is there anybody on the board like Zion that can give you superstar potential in the second round? That's where you have trouble with trying to figure out what you want to do, especially if you're early in the snake.
See, it's funny. You asked me the question about where I would be happy with Zion. Another player that I think fits that same mold of conversation, which I would love to ask you about, what's a good spot for Ball?
Oh, welcome to my
Right?
dark horse. Welcome
Okay,
to my
okay,
welcome to
okay.
my dark horse. So that's a great question, because I think the thing with LaMelo that is tough for fantasy owners this year specifically is the trade on the board this year? Like, is it possible that he's the best point guard available in the NBA? Because those names are aging out of the league and he's getting more and more valuable. And Charlotte looks far away, but they're interesting, right? Like, this is an interesting roster. So in the last 2 years, you've been able to pretend like maybe they could be a play-in team if things go right, and especially if he's playing defense the way that their coach needs him to play defense, because they put up the points. They just need to slow down teams in the regular season. So the question becomes, is he going to fit that mold? Or is he going to be a player like last year that was in and out of the rotation, that was, taken out of games sometimes late in the fourth quarter, that was shaving minutes? Is that somebody that you want to put stock into. And for me, and I'll go ahead and give my answer here on stream just because it's you. Uh, and I'm either going to get him or I'm not going to get him. It depends on who's drafting in front of me.
Right.
I'm going to take LaMelo in that situation to step up to that bell. This is the first time in his career that he's being asked to really respond um, to an adversity that's placed on him. So I think he's well within like the maturity threshold to answer that bell. Even though he gets hit with the immature kind of title, he's in Charlotte and he's making a metric ton of money. And the fact that he's kind of been in basketball and kept his nose out of a lot of stuff, I think tells me a lot about him and who he is, especially after the whirlwind that was his first draft year. So to me, the player has a lot to answer. There's so much upside, and he's right in that range in the third round where you can get a guy that can give you 28 a night on 10 assists, plus a bunch of other stats. And you also get a guy that I think, if the unknowable happens and he's traded, is still a killer in his role on high usage. That's young enough that I'm not as worried about injury. So for you, LaMelo Ball, where do you fall? How do you feel about the player, especially in the fantasy?
Again, another player that I have had FC in for a long time. I was an avid watcher of Ball in the family. I watched I was locked in on him. I gotta be honest, man. I might zig on LaMelo, and I say this because I don't care too much about what people think about how mature he is. He's a bucket getter. He gets stats. He's a phenomenal fantasy player. It comes down for me to one thing: is he playing more than 30
Is
games?
he playing?
Because like his last 3 years, he has not been able to play more than 40 games in a season. And for fantasy, in an 82 game season, if he's missing games like that, that's gonna really, really be bad. And then on top of it, right, if Charlotte doesn't trade him, let's say they understand, okay, there's a good draft. We can sit LaMelo at the end. A huge aspect people do not look at enough is how likely is it that this player is going to be playing at the end of the season, which, by the way, is when you're in the playoffs trying to win the league. You need players that are going to actually be playing. He's young enough to where you would expect him to be in that mode. But again, for me, it comes down to games played. Can he be more durable and reliable this year? Same thing can be said for Zion, but at least with Zion, you have seen a season of him playing almost, I would say, all the games in a year. Plus, he has a contract incentive where he needs to play to get his money guaranteed. So you feel like he's going to, play a whole lot of games. With LaMelo, I just don't know.
So I think that for me, I always build around centers and wings first, typically.
Right.
So my thought process here is more about, okay, well, I'm probably going to need a guard by round 3. So let's just go through some of this. All right. In the
Sure.
range of LaMelo Ball, De'Aaron Fox, Franz, who really isn't a guard, but we can get similar production. Dyson, Giddy, Derek White, John Morant, Jaylen Brown. So there's some really interesting names in that tier. Um,
There's some
but
good names in that tier.
and there's guys that can really fill it up. Like Derek White is probably going to really fill it up. Boston, for me, I don't have a lot of high stock in Boston players as it sits right now. Most of their tenured guys have been on runs and runs and runs, playoffs after playoffs after playoffs. So to take Jaylen Brown, who's already going to have so much of the load on him without Jason Tatum this year, it's going to need to be the right situation for me because I am worried about injury. I'm worried about the accumulation of minutes. I'm worried about a lot of these things, but the Boston dudes are going to play. It's just there's an opportunity with LaMelo, especially if you have a stacked forwards, like stacked wings at the
Yes.
beginning of the first 2 rounds, or you stack centers or whatever fell into your lap best available first 2 rounds. You have an opportunity with LaMelo to get a superstar point guard and like a true locked in, this is my point guard day in, day out. But availability becomes the problem. And not just availability with his health, but availability with like his coach. And that's the only thing I was going to tell you is they're trying to win.
Yes.
That doesn't mean they will. but they're trying, and he's got to play. So he's an interesting player. You got another one of those, somebody that you're thinking about, like how high, how low could they go?
Oh boy. Honestly, yes. And you said one of his teammates, Paolo, is a very intriguing player for me
Yeah, yeah,
because ideally you would think that he would be a phenomenal guy in terms of stats and whatnot, but sometimes he has times where he can be pretty underwhelming. The games played can be questionable, but he's in for a season where, okay, there's more spacing next to him. There's a good sense about how good the Magic will be defensively, and you think that he can fit into that and probably have his best year as a pro. But he's at a spot where there might be some other guys you can get before him that might just be healthier and can produce, I would say, similar numbers. I think Jalen Williams versus Paolo is a very interesting conversation because we've seen players where, like, hey, if you can play more positions and produce, how comparable is that, you know?
and the positions thing, when we start talking about fantasy, is like the most important thing. Jalen Williams is one of the most impactful fantasy players last year, not because of top 10, 20, 30 production, but because he's listed in four positions.
Wild, wild stuff.
So when you can get a player like that that's listed at like three or four positions, how much more important are they to your fantasy roster build? Like, what can you do with those rotations? Dudes like Paulo are great examples of that too. And then Jalen Brown gets the two position nod. You know, Trey Murphy, how high does
Yeah.
he go? A lot of people are very high on Trey Murphy. And then if you watch any preseason basketball, where are you taking the number one pick in the draft? Like, how high do you take Cooper
Cooper
Flag?
Flag has been, yeah, it's a good name too.
And
Man.
these are just like the top 50 guys. When you really start to stack into well, let's do it like this instead of that. Is there any team, like I told you, Boston is a team that I just don't love the value of the players. Not
Right.
saying I wouldn't take it. Like Jalen Brown's obviously a player I'm going to take if he's available in the fourth. But what are some teams where you're like, I just don't like the players here? I don't know if I would take any of these guys.
have a team for you. The Utah Jazz. I am anti anything Utah. Not just because of the location, but specifically, they're the most unreliable team in terms of I don't know if this player is playing, and there will legitimately be no update. They're just not playing. And even if they're super duper young, they have sat a lot of their young players at the end of the season, and you get nothing for it in return. Plus, ironically, a lot of their players are injury prone as well. So
Yes.
now it's like, I don't know what to rely on for that team. And also, it's crazy, by the way. Half those players could get traded. So, like, there's so many things you have to worry about before drafting a actual player from the team.
I don't know how often someone's used hyperbole and said half the players could be traded, but literally half of the
Literally.
players could be traded, you know. Uh for it's Utah. It's Utah, Laurie, you know, maybe. Maybe
Maybe.
it depends on when I'm looking at him. Walker Kessler is probably a big no for me. So if I'm already out at Walker Kessler, I'm probably out at, you know, Taylor. I'm probably out at,
Yeah.
I don't even know if Chris Duarte still over there.
Yeah. I actually forget, to be honest.
I wanted to make a joke, but it's terrible on our fantasy basketball show. I don't know where Chris Duarte is, if he's even in the league. Um, Toronto's a team for me where I have a hard time valuing
Okay.
those assets. I don't understand truly who's going to be on the roster, who's not going to be on the roster. Scotty Barnes is already dealing with a nagging injury, so the headliner of the team, you're like, geez, here we go again with this guy. He's injured going into the year. So how is he going to hold up when they're asking him to be the primary facilitator in a lot of these sets and these actions that they want to get to that are high motion? They don't want RJ Barrett being the primary ball handler every single possession because it
Might get
limits,
traded too.
and he might get traded.
Yeah. Yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
I would assume that Emmanuel Quickly, just like they were a package before, they will be a package again. The numbers just make sense, but maybe not. But the deal is half of these guys, I don't know who's here, the longevity of the players, what their roles are going to be, what their situations are going to be. If RJ is traded, he certainly isn't going to play as big of a role as he's playing here unless he goes to some junk team, which I don't understand why anybody would be buying on RJ Barrett uh, when Toronto doesn't really have too much to offer a lot of
Yeah.
roster. If Toronto's involved in the 3-team trade, that third team is probably trying to pick up RJ Barrett to help them with, rim pressure or scoring, like ball handling, off ball kind of secondary scoring potential. So that role is going to diminish. I don't have anybody in Toronto that I'm looking at where I'm like, I really want to get that player. There's some waiver guys, but for the rest of the draft, I don't think there's anyone I will target from Toronto unless someone's there that I just really didn't expect. If I'm picking up like RJ in the 7th round, I'll definitely add RJ Barrett.
Mm. I think the closest player for me on that roster, if I had to pick, is between Brandon Ingram and Jakob Poeltl. I say Jakob because Jakob is a sneaky good fantasy player because of the rebounds, passes. BI is interesting because he's clearly like going to be the best perimeter scorer on the team. But again, the problem with him is injuries. Like he missed the majority of the season last year off something that I thought wouldn't really keep him out that long. The main problem with them too, though, is like the fit of what their offense is going to be and the structure of it. Like we don't know how that battle is going to play out consistently. So I wouldn't be too high on Toronto either. But there are some interesting guys where, like, if you were desperate, you could probably make some work.
Would you take Jakob over Isaiah Hartenstein?
Yes, I would.
There you go. See, I
I
would
think he
probably
plays.
still.
Oh,
No, I would probably still take Isaiah, but you're going to go with minutes played, right?
yeah, mainly minutes played, but also like the role. I don't think at this point Hardenstein is going to be tasked with having to do too much heavy lifting. I think Jakob's role is larger to get more stats, and I think he's also going to play more minutes.
No, until Chet plays a full season, I might still be taking Isaiah. But
I mean, that's fair. I can't be mad at you. Like, is sorry, is it going to be the year where Chet plays a full? Because he does have a year where he played literally every single game.
yeah,
So it's like I don't know exactly how many games we'll see from Chet. I just know that normally in a vacuum, I want the higher usage player unless they have more injuries. And I just think Jakob is going to be asked to do more on both ends on a night-to-night basis than iHeart. Plus, iHeart is like a guy where it's like I can have 2 points, 4 rebounds, maybe 3 assists, and I had a phenomenal game, and they don't need me to do a whole lot. They're going to need Jakob to do a whole lot if this team wants to win.
yeah, especially without Scotty. I mean, Jakob's like the go-to de facto play finisher.
Yeah.
Um, so that's a great example. Like you guys from this felt out my ethos of like, I don't love when teams make deep runs, especially multiple years of deep runs, because those players tend to have short leashes when it comes to injuries. And Gifted really likes ex-fat players, loves them.
Love it. It's my
Luca
thing.
Luca will be going first and Zion second.
Luka's gonna cook this year. I feel like,
Me
especially
too.
because there's no LeBron to start the year.
That's my
Yeah.
That's my MVP pick this year is Luca. Um, but yeah, so this is a great little introduction to kind of how this is going to go. Stuff will happen in our season. We'll touch base on it. Gifted, you have 17 different advertisements down the bottom. So tell people where they can reach you and what you're doing outside of this.
Yes. So outside of this, I am a content creator. I make content around the NBA. I watch a lot of basketball, so we talk about it a ton. I also do live game watches as well. So tap in. I'm literally everywhere at Gifted Hoops. You can follow me on Twitter at Gifted Hoops _ and on my YouTube channel at Gifted Hoops. That's all you need.
And yeah, I'm just at Tony Schwartz NBA. That's where you're gonna find me, and you won't find me there often. But I will be doing this weekly with my boy, man. It's been great having you here. I can't wait for next week. Recount this draft.
First episode, man. Yeah, can't wait.
First episode. Rich Sweater Gang.
We gonna see how we do in this draft. I can't wait to see exactly how we feel about Good night. It'll be fun to watch.
I will be wearing this sweater.